from, could you tell me a little bit about your project? I heard from Katri, sounded amazing, and I read a little bit from your website. But can you describe what it is and what you've been doing?
Sure. So I run sorry, I can hear myself.
Oh, I think this might be my headphones. Let me see. What about now? Start talking and let me know if you hear yourself.
Okay, sure. So, yeah, no, that's good. Okay. So I run a school for kids ages 3 through 7, actually now 8, because one of our 7-year-olds just turned 8. And it's based in play and self-directed education. So the idea that kids are communicating with us all the time and are innately curious. And so we want to facilitate a space where kids can learn and discover and grow in community with each other and with their own free will. So yeah, I mean, I started it as a co-op in our house with just 5 kids, including my son. And it grew. I mean, we did that for 1 year and then had more people interested. And then, so we looked into renting a larger space outside of our home. And then I found the Agile Learning Center, whose website I presume is the one you're referencing, the ALC. So I, over a period of a summer, 2 summers ago, trained with the Agile Learning Center and met a lot of those people, and then developed a partnership. So their tools are made for kids, you know, their tools to help guide and facilitate this idea of self-directed education are meant for kids ages 7 and up. And so for the last year and a half, I've been working on adapting those principles and those tools to work for younger kids. But now our program, you know, last year we only had 6-year-olds, but then the 6-year-olds have stayed. So it's kind of growing now in our own neighborhood. So we may end up with 2 satellite schools, you know, with mixed age. Let's see, I'm kind of all over the place, jumping all over.
No, that's okay. I have a ton of questions following up to many of that. So great. You can continue or I can start.
Yeah, no, just ask specific questions. That's great.
I'm also all over the place with the questions. Let me think. So could you tell me a little bit about how and why you started first the co-op with your kids?
Sure. Yeah. So my background is in education. I was a public school teacher right out of college. And then I went into work in state government in education policy. And so I worked for 5 years for our local state Department of Education. So I've always been interested in the system of education and wanting to improve it and make it better. So then I had my own kid, and when we moved to New York City, I stopped working full time and spent more time with my son. And it's kind of like everything I thought I knew was wrong after being with him and getting to watch him learn and grow. And I kind of had this, my husband and I both had this moment when he turned 2. We realized that as adults, we listen to our babies. They communicate with us and we listen, right? They cry and they want one of 3 things. But then we realized that the difficulties we were having as the parents of a 2-year-old were that he could communicate differently, and we stopped listening to what he was saying. And, you know, he would say no, and we were like, well, you can't just say no. And anyway, it's, yeah. So realizing that, then we just started focusing on listening to our kid and in a new way, I guess I would say. And so then we were looking, the reason we started the co-op, my husband was in school full time and I was not working in a traditional way. So we couldn't afford the preschools and the co-ops in New York City. And one of my friends said, well, we'll pay you, just start it. And, you take the kids, you run the co-op. Like, all right. So I thought about doing that, did that. And in the process of having him in the co-op, Bannock was reaching the age where compulsory school was required. So we started to look at other options, and we went to all of the public schools in our neighborhood, and we went to all of those tours and asked questions. For us, a huge question was, how much time does the kid spend outside? And in one of our neighborhood schools, the answer was every other day they get to go outside. That was devastating to us. And at that school, the outside time was organized. So one day when you were outside, you would have to play kickball or whatever the thing was. And so there was no freedom even when they were outside. And then the other question that I had when I was on these tours was about homework. And all of the schools proudly told us that, yes, even the kindergartners had homework and would take home a homework packet on Monday, but then the family could do it at their leisure, and then it wouldn't have to be due until Friday. So really you could do it all on one day, you could spread it out. It was up to us. So that told me that the homework packet was meaningless. It had no direct relation to whatever was happening for the kid in school that day. And those two things, homework for kids that age and lack of outdoor time, led us to then look at private schools. So although we didn't have money, we thought, okay, well, there've got to be plenty of private schools that have grants and, provide scholarships. So we went and toured 4 private schools that we were really interested, that we thought sounded progressive. And
which
toured
ones?
those. Which ones? Okay, let's see. It's called, here, let me just Google while we're talking. Manhattan Country School.
It's not that important, but I was just curious if there's any one of those that I should look at, just because I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. So we looked at the Manhattan Country School, the City and Country School. You can see there just the outdoor, even in the country piece, was appealing. And then we looked at the Brooklyn Free School. And I think we had one other, but those were the 3 that we actually applied and toured. Yeah, so we went down that road. Felt even in the tours there that it still wasn't as progressive as we were hoping to find. And so it was around that same time and in that search that I found the Agile Learning Center. And Bannock was too young, because they, at that point, only accepted kids ages 7 and up. And so he was still too young, because he was 5, about to turn 6. But in my conversations with them, that led to us deciding to keep growing what we had started and to not put him in another environment, and then led to the partnership with the Agile Learning Center. And so kind of with that, with all of those things coming together at the same time, we realized, okay, we're going to grow this thing and create our own school. So this is now our 2nd year as the kind of the younger program for the ALC. So there. And also our daughter, when we started last year, our daughter had just turned 3. So she was then, she was 2 last year. So we started with kids ages 2 through 6. So I could include both of our kids in the same thing. That was another piece that was important to me. The idea that we split siblings up you know, we split kids up just because of their age. And it'd be really devastating on my daughter to just not see her brother anymore for most of the day. And that felt weird and abnormal. And I had talked to other moms who had gone through that. Like, it's difficult then with the youngest, because they're like, what happened to my sibling? They're in school, they're gone now. And yeah, and so the principles too that are really critical to me are the mixed age. I mean, I felt like even when we had the co-op in our home, the preschool co-op in our home, we had mixed age then too. So I had Bannock, I think when we started that was 5. And so I had 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And really, like my grandmother taught in a one-room schoolhouse. And so that model of educating makes sense to me, that kids of mixed ages are all together. So there was also a long-winded answer to how we started.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Could you tell me, going off with this, that you started talking about the principles that matter to you? Could you tell me a little bit about, I would say maybe both the principles of, well, you mentioned the most important to you when you started, and then also the ones that you see from the Agile Learning Center, and if they have been different or merging, also kind of help me make that distinction.
Sure.
In kind of understanding the context of the projects.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just start. Yeah. When I started the co-op, the things that were important to me were that it was that kids went outside every day, no matter what, that kids of mixed age were together, and the idea of age would be irrelevant. And that kids would have an opportunity to, if they had an idea, there would be space for them to follow that idea every single day, that they would have that opportunity. And then, so after a year of doing this, actually about 4 months in, the fall, by Christmas, I wanted to stop the co-op. I was like, I cannot handle this anymore. And I realized what the issue was my traditional training and the way that I thought I should do it, even in my own home, even when it was the program I was creating. I still put on myself the same standard of planning or way of planning that I had as a public school teacher. So I would make lesson plans for myself, and the things that I felt were limiting to me in that environment as a school teacher, I still felt like I had to do. And it was then in January where I actually let go of that completely and shifted my focus to this idea of intention and acting with intention. So I always have an intention that I want to share with the kids, or something that I want to bring to my time with them, but I don't have lesson plans anymore. And I don't, have this prescribed thing that we're going to do. And so that was a principle that kind of shifted for me during that year. And then when I found the Agile Learning Center, it was this huge aha moment, because I read the website and felt like the website articulated the things that like the way I thought it should be done and the way I was trying to do it. But it actually had words for that. So that was having language to describe what I was intending to do was a huge kind of merging point. But the things that I believed deeply are, and always had, are the Agile roots. The idea that learning is natural and it's happening all the time. That we learn best when we decide what we want to learn, when we're making our own decisions. And that we learn the most from the environment around us and what we're experiencing. And that was a principle that I had been raised with. My parents had, always valued experience more than being in the classroom. So if there was anything that came up, like if my dad had a business trip that he could take us out of school so that we could accompany, they would always choose that. And so again, reading the ALC website, it was this moment of, oh yes, these are the things I believe too. This should be at the foundation of how we approach learning with kids, and especially learning with young kids. I mean, all of those three roots that I just mentioned, those are just obvious when you're with young kids. And so I also had this like pulling feeling of, I don't want anything to change for my kids right now. I don't want to put them in an environment that is going to like operate from a different foundation. Because I felt like the ALC foundation was the foundation we as a family had been operating from, and I didn't want to take that away from them. So yeah, those principles. I just kind of get blabby, but.
No worries, it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
But it's great stuff too. I'm excited. It's very much in line with what I have been finding in this case study for Reggio Emilia based environments. So that's exciting.
Oh, and okay, so that specifically you're doing a case study on Reggio Emilia based environments. Okay, yes. Great.
It started out being more open. It's for a publication called Sustainability, Wellbeing, and the Future of Education. And they asked me to do some research on some early childhood environments. And I wanted to include a variety, but in the end, started with Reggio Emilia because I knew it was a very rich in many respects case and very varied. And so in just starting that one, it was clear that I should just focus on that one because it was a short case. But the objective of focusing on, well, it's not actually on, like I didn't visit the schools in Italy, so it's about the Reggio Emilia inspired schools around. But the main objective of the study is to kind of bring to light some basic principles on learning in our early childhood. That, and it doesn't matter if it's Reggio Emilia or whatever else.
Right.
And it's the Agile Learning Center was one of the main kind of things that the same when I read the website, it just gave me this deep resonance of, I mean, in the end, I was just looking for places that are deeply respectful to the learning process of children. And it seemed like that. And now after doing most of the research for the Reggio-like environments, these things that you mentioned are very much also at the basis of that, or at least from where I am standing in looking at them. So that's really interesting.
And where are you located? Where are you right now? Are you in Finland?
Right now I'm in London, on my way from Finland. I'm actually going to New York next week.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so if I could come for a visit or something like that would be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to be spending actually 2 weeks from December 2nd to 14th in New York.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I can tell you more about this whole research and the work that I've been doing.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to read the final article too. Tell me again the name of the publication.
It's Sustainability, Wellbeing, and the Future of Education. It's coming out only on spring next year, but there's already some explanation online on what it's going to be. It's a Finnish think tank that's organizing this. And it's nice because they're going to do kind of work groups with mostly Finnish people, I think, in Helsinki next year. So after the publication, they're going to gather people in education to kind of work on either starting new projects or advancing their own organizations based on these ideas that all of the articles and case studies will be highlighting. So so the think tank is basically in charge of kind of moving different sectors of society forward into the future in an intentional manner. So thinking about what the needs are and will be later on, which is very interesting work. I can send you the link to
that would be great.
Yeah.
You like put it in the chat or something. That'd be great.
Yeah. So mainly why I asked Katri in the beginning was to include the ACL as in the case study, but then since it evolved being mainly about Reggio Emilia, I waited, but then I realized that even for the kind of for the finishing or the conclusion thing, would be nice to see other examples where these principles are being reflected,
right?
Especially because the Agile Learning Center is for older kids, which you mentioned, right? It seems to me like it's the same principles, but for older ones, which is very interesting because I haven't seen too many examples that at least sound quite like that.
Right.
Like that based on self-directed learning and doing it in such a way that's so, well, I should ask you more before I jump into.
And hold on, I'm gonna put a plug. Just had to get my power cord.
Yeah, so I would like to ask you more specifically about how the Agile Learning Center works. But before that, before I forget, what you talked about raised a question that I wanted to zoom into, which was, yes, when you were saying how you had this way of working from your previous education or experience, doing the lesson plans, and then when you let go of that, could you zoom into that experience and share a little bit of what actually changed and how that process was for you? Because I get the feeling that there's a lot in that transition from that way of working into what you did.
Yeah, sure. I think, I haven't done this verbally, so you'll get, I mean, I don't know, I'll be kind of all over the place, but yeah. I reflected on teaching in the first place and realized that a lot of the days that it felt the most frustrating and like we were going nowhere were the days that I had spent the most time planning and put the most energy and preparation into planning this great lesson. And then it didn't go there, or we didn't have time to get to it, or whatever the things were that happened in the day. That was crushing. And so I was seeing that start to happen, like I said, in our own living room. And I only had a group of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds who wanted to play and have fun. And I was preventing that in so many ways because of this like feeling that we had to get through these things that I created. Yet on paper, the space I had described to parents was exactly that, this place that's free and it's self-directed. Yet it took, and it still takes time to figure out how to really be with kids in that space and to give that freedom, to give ourselves permission for that freedom, because we know that's what we want for the kids. I also had this like feeling that I needed to provide a product to the families every day, like send something home with the kids, to show something that we've done. And this is also part of what I want to get away from, because this is not what I expect of my kid, that at the end of the day, he has a product to show for his day, like something that was so meaningful that he wants to save it. I mean, that's ridiculous. Yet, because of my traditional schooling and, you send stuff home in the backpack, there are papers that go home and there's stuff. And so it was, kind of just this ongoing conversation, and one boy in this group who he helped me with the kind of stuff piece, in that no matter what we did, whether the kids just ended up drawing or painting or, anytime we created something that could be considered shareable or considered stuff, I would ask if he would want to take it home, and he'd be like, no, you can just toss it. And that was so freeing. I mean, this idea that not everything has to be, that the value is not in the thing that gets sent home with the parents. So let's see, how else did I go through this? So the main piece of the transition was just that I stopped writing stuff down. I mean, of course, I still am thinking about things in my head, and I consider myself a curator. I really like this idea of curating education, and I do that for my kids as a mom, and I love to do that, like curate a space. And what I mean by that is that, like, putting out invitations to play. So I started curating instead of lesson planning. And I started, putting out things that I may have had an intention with why I put it out, but then the beauty and the joy came from where it went, from the kids' intentions and the kids' ideas instead of mine. And that was awesome. And then the other piece, after reading more about the Agile Learning Center and the ALC, the idea of offering really resonated with me too, that we all have things that we're really passionate about that we want to offer and share with others. And when those are the things we're sharing, it's amazing. I mean, that's when the kids want to experience it. And recognizing, as a elementary school teacher, whether you love all of the components of what you have to teach or not, you have to teach them. And so you try your best to, like, really get into it yourself so that you're believable, so that the kids will believe you and want to learn it. But I, through the ALC model, now let go of that, have identified and found the things that I'm most passionate about sharing with kids. And then I bring other people into our space who have other things that they want to offer and share with the kids. So as facilitators, like, each of the facilitators at our school does have an offering that they give every week, but it's based in their personal passion, as opposed to me saying, okay, well, we need somebody to teach music. Like, Katri loves singing and sharing that with kids. And because that's her personal passion, she finds new things to bring to that and new ways of engaging the kids. And so I think that's really cool and critical too. And I love cooking with kids. It's super messy and crazy, but it's awesome. And they, there's so many things when I get, like, you can teach math and you can teach science, but for me, it's just about cooking with kids and sharing that with them. And those pieces come naturally from it then. I don't have to plan a math lesson around it. That happens naturally. And so the transition for me was knowing that and believing that it happens naturally. But now the challenge is practicing that. And yeah, it's still something that we talk about and work on. And because it's hard. I think our society and the school structure that we've had for the last 150 years is based very differently than that. So we have to kind of fight against ourselves. But it's been a totally positive shift. So
nice. So how many teachers do you have now?
We have 4 now. Well, myself and 3 others.
Okay. And how have you guys either if you have trained them or how have you arranged these ways of working together in this different role that usually teachers aren't necessarily prepared to do from the offset?
Yeah. Well, that's evolving every day. I think the thing that I look for in bringing people into the community as facilitators or teachers is, for me, the greatest thing is instinct. Like the instinct for interacting with a kid. I was just having this conversation with my husband. So now I'm trying to think, just let me think for a second. Because we're actually getting ready in a year, next year, we're going to move. We're moving to Montana and we'll be opening a school there. And so this process in New York, it's grown organically and over time, but now we're going to go and actually start a school from the beginning, like with the intention of, getting a space, hiring teachers. And so we've been having this conversation about the people, and now I'm just having a hard time. Let me think about this. So, this is hard.
Well, if you want to push in that direction to see what comes, that's fine. But it's also not like this conversation isn't really that I need to cover specific things. I'm just poking you where I see that there might come interesting stuff.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. But I have a million other
I'll come back to
it. So
okay, I'll come back to that because it's in my mind. I just want to find words.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Whenever you're ready, you can also just share that or whatever else you feel compelled.
Yeah, I'll jump in if it pulls at me. I can.
Yeah. Okay. So the other thing, and by the way you described the transition was beautiful. I was just like, I wish I could just quote you for a whole page. Can I quote you, by the way? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. You just touched on a lot of things that I want to highlight, and it's great to see that it's actually happening in practice and not just in my head. So that's perfect. Yeah. So I guess then we could go also to the what the Agile Learning Center is, how it works. I don't really know much more than what I saw in the webpage about a month ago.
Yeah.
So could you explain a little bit about what it is?
Yeah. So the Agile Learning Center is a K-12 school for self-directed learners. And so in my environment, technically right now, our school, the Cottonwood for the 3 through 7-year-olds, is a pilot program of the upper school. So, do you want specifically the 3 through 7s, my program, or Cottonwood or the ALC, in practice in New York?
Yeah, I'd like to get a basis for what the ALC is in general.
Great. Okay.
First, that to kind of get the context of where this emerged from. And also I'm just super intrigued because I haven't seen examples of this in K through 12. Specifically self-directed. So I'm curious also for that.
Okay. So the Agile Learning Center started a number of years ago when the Manhattan Free School, are you familiar with free schools or democratic school?
Just a bit, yeah.
Okay. So the Manhattan Free School was a democratic school in the same space, I think maybe 5 years ago now. And that school was going to close for a number of reasons. And so a team within the school, a parent and one of the teachers, got together and said they felt like the reason the school wasn't working were because of the tools and the practices that were being employed in the school environment. So this idea of a democratic education where kids are running the school as a democracy, and you can call all school meetings and have votes, and that sort of thing, it was taking away from the experience of the kids in the space. That was taking up more time, and the kids actually then weren't as free to pursue their passions because of that. So they, familiar with the dad actually was had worked in software development and computer stuff, and so the agile principles come from software development. And so they took those ideas and said, okay, let's put them into our school environment, because we still want kids to be in control, but we don't want it to take so long. And so some of these ideas of how to better equip the facilitators and the kids to practice managing their own education and practice managing their school. And so they kind of describe it as an upgrade to a democratic free school. That's what an Agile Learning Center is. So there are a few main things that happen. There's like a morning meeting where all of the kids, they have called them spawn points. There are two, they kind of group out just as the number of kids grows. So it's maybe 8 kids, and those kids verbalize and document what their intentions are for that day. By setting that intention and making it visible to the community, other people can say, oh, I'm interested in doing that with you. Let's do it at this time. And so that happens in the morning. It's a quick meeting. And then there's the tool it's called a Kanban, and it's a Japanese tool for project management, which we've also adapted for the school environment. Some kids have a physical paper, like notebook kind of Kanban, where they put their intentions and kind of set their plan. But we also use an online version of that called Trello to track their intentions over time. So there's that morning meeting. Then the day is open. There are offerings given throughout the day. And in that morning meeting, they kind of plan out the whole week, or I guess they set the week on Mondays. We set the day with the younger kids because setting a week is too much. I guess they set the week on Monday. So they all come together and set out, here are all of the things being offered at the school this week, so that kids can kind of start making their plan. Let's see. Those are some tools. Another critical piece that I haven't talked about yet, because it just also becomes so much a part of the environment, is the culture, and this idea of culture creation, and like working intentionally to create culture where kids are supported, kids support each other, and we're all working in community. So there are tools that the ALC uses for that as well. We use a tool called, and it all looks different with the younger kids, but it's the name of it just went out of my head, but you have awarenesses, and then you practice doing something to address that awareness. For example, we have ants. So then a kid might suggest, okay, let's only eat in the kitchen. Let's not eat in every room in the school. And then you implement that. And then after you implement it, if it's really going well, you practice it, and then it becomes mastered. So it's a tool that helps with this cultural development. But again, kids are, as opposed to a democratic free school where if people take a vote, the majority wins, then that becomes like a rule of the school. And I feel like the Agile way is a little bit more fluid and responsive to the fact that it might have been a bad idea, and it shouldn't be so hard to change. I will email you when we're done. There are 4 these like kind of one-pagers. They're kind of handouts that talk about these principles and in a really concise and clear way, which I am not as concise. So I'll email you those too, which will be helpful. But yeah,
awesome.
So I would
Thank
just
you.
describe it as an agile environment where kids are really supported and have tools to actually help them articulate their intentions and track them and follow them through.
Okay. So can I check a little bit of my assumptions about this with you?
Yes,
like tell
that's
you
great.
what I know and you tell me if it's true or not. So do they not have a set curriculum of what things they need to learn?
Correct.
Do the kids like decide for themselves each day, week, month, what they do?
Yes.
Yep. What else? They don't call teachers teachers, right? They're facilitators.
Correct.
I love this. I want to start one of my own. Yeah. I downloaded the kit a while back, but I haven't gotten to it with so much going on.
Yeah.
What else was there? So about the organization, I assume that maybe each one works differently in terms of organizational structure, but are there some common threads of how it, so you mentioned that it's kind of a way of working, and these tools kind of help the organization say like, this is not working, let's just change it, which is also in the agile principles. But could you describe a little bit more about how that influences the organizational structure in most of these centers?
Sure. So so if you've been to one ALC, you've been to one ALC. So we do feel that like every ALC is different. But the assumptions, the four, the agile roots are kind of the grounding force. Like if you ALC, if you believe those four things fundamentally, use the tools. At this point, the organization has been also growing organically in that, like there are people who are helping, like I had a ton of support in order to grow my school here when we started, but I didn't, like those people weren't being paid to support me. We all are like working together, which is also really cool. Let's see, let me think what the question you asked, how like
I can help you frame this. So the why I'm asking is because the kind of overarching thesis, if you want to call it, of the case study is that there's two main things that need to be present for a school system to be responsive and adaptable for the changes that we're facing and will continue facing. Those two things are, one, respect for the child and understanding what listening to him and means and how you need to understand his learning process as an individual in a group setting. And then the other one is having a way of organizing yourself as an organization that is not static, whereas in schools are traditionally having a set structure that really prevents change and evolution. Most of the cases that I have been looking at actually promote the opposite. So always are trying to reorganize even their own structures of how they work and the rules of how they work.
Yes. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I would say I'm the same. I come from what you just described. Like our ALC, we together as facilitators get together and talk about how to change our own structures too. How can we do it differently? That's another personal belief of mine, is that if something isn't working with a child, whether it's my own child or a kid in the environment, the first place I look is to the adults in the space. What can the adults in the space do differently? And, as a parent too, if my kid's being defiant or any of these words we might use to describe behavior, I look at what I can do to change that. So I do think that is a really critical, like, kind of operating piece. To be able to be agile and fluid and make changes is critical. As in the ALC as an organization, we have weekly calls. We use Google Hangout. And so we get together face to face as often or as little as we would like, but there's a facilitator call every Monday night. So I'm on Google Hangout with facilitators in Hawaii, North Carolina, New York, like my colleagues in Manhattan. We, still get to see each other in this capacity. And we talk, we share ideas with each other. Even though our schools look different and we're in different places, we have that space to communicate with each other, which is just super cool. I mean, that was another piece that really drew me, was wanting to have community in that way too. Not starting your own thing all on your own. And then we have, so the ALC has created a summer training program as well. And so I've gone for the last 2 summers to North Carolina, which is where we have another ALC. And that is a really neat thing, because you're together with the people who are starting the school, who are there because they want to facilitate a school or teach, in a school like this, but may not be associated with one yet. And out of this last summer, we had a group of people in their early 20s who, there were like a handful who came just to train themselves because they want to work in a school like this. They're not ready to start a school, but this is where they want to work. So we called them like the roving ALFs. And now the connections that brought are really neat. One of the schools then, in another school that was opening in North Carolina, after a couple of months, they got big enough that then they were like, okay, now we can't afford to hire someone. So they brought in one of the people from the summer training. So I feel a part of a very fluid and like changing organization. And that's really cool. Like, I know that if we go start our school in Montana, this guy, Drew, he's kind of the tech person behind the ALC. He can do any of the tech stuff. And he does that just because he really believes in this organization, not because anyone's paying him. I mean, we'd all like to all get it to this kind of place, but that also blows me away. But yeah, he'll come out to Montana and stay for a couple weeks and help us get technologically hooked up if we need that. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question actually.
Yeah,
but,
this is also pretty remarkable. I honestly think it would be worth just a whole case study to dig into how, because just the fact that it's this kind of organization that is in many places and it's always in flux and it's so different and contextualized in each place, but at the same time, you all support each other even though money doesn't bind you. Right. Or a formal organization doesn't bind you. And I think that's super remarkable and refreshing to see happen. You got me to a place where I stopped thinking that much about the case study and then started thinking about my future plans.
Oh, good. Well, hey, that's okay. Happy to help.
Yeah, it is very exciting. I mean, when I downloaded the kit, like I said, just out of curiosity, because I know I want to start one, like a school like this one day, but still feel like I'm not ready. But I downloaded it to see, and I got an email a couple of days afterwards by some people in Dominican Republic saying that they saw that I downloaded it from Mexico, because I'm from Mexico. And that if I needed any help or support, they were available. And I was like, wow.
Yeah. So we use Slack internally. Do you know Slack?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another cool thing. Like, we use Slack throughout our network. So when somebody downloads the toolkit like that, yeah, they'll put it out on Slack and say, oh, we see it's, who can reach out to this person. And yeah, I'm so glad to know that happened. And Yeah, it is. It's
wow.
neat.
Yeah.
And we've been using Slack too, amongst us facilitators just at our own school, like the 4 of us. And that's really, it's neat. It's a cool tool to be using as a teacher. Like, things happen, even though we're tiny, we only have 18 kids and there are 4 of us, still, like, I might have a conversation with a parent about an issue that they want us to keep our eyes on, and to then just be able to put it on Slack and have all of them see it, know it. And I like that. The technology piece too is, I think, really important.
Yeah, and especially, I think, generally absent in education, this kind of mindset in general.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something about more schools in Manhattan. Is that where it was started originally?
Yes. Technically the first ALC was in Manhattan, and I mean, it's still there. It's, the website that you've looked at. So right now we're in the process of figuring out what to do with Cottonwood, like whether Cottonwood will continue, because at first we started, like, I sold it to them as, I need you and you need me. I need you guys because you already have a license and are already an established independent school, and you need me because you don't accept kids under age 7. And I felt like it was a travesty that a kid would have to go to another school first and then be old enough to come to this school. It just didn't make sense. But now that our kids are, so the idea was that it would be a feeder school, and that when the kids turned 7 from my school, they would go up to Manhattan. But now that is a far commute. And so now the conversation is, can we just, I'm in Brooklyn, so can we have the Brooklyn ALC and just continue to grow our school here as the kids grow in age? So that's another consideration. But then the school in North Carolina, which is where we have our summer training, that started pretty simultaneously, in that the guy Thomas, who, if you continue this conversation, you have to talk to Thomas because he is super articulate and concise. And he's the teacher who was working at the Manhattan Free School. He's the teacher who helped transform this into what it is now. And have you read Peter Gray? Freedom to Learn, Free to Learn?
No, just a bit.
Okay. Well, he's also started a new organization that Thomas is helping with, just about self-directed education. And so I'll send you some links on that because they're doing really neat work. But anyway, so Thomas ended up going down to North Carolina to help. The school in North Carolina was an independent school as well, like more like a free school, a democratic school. And they were having a really hard time. So they brought Thomas in to help them kind of try these agile tools. And then he ended up marrying her, the woman who was running that school. So he's now in North Carolina too.
Wow.
Yeah, it's neat. It's how it's grown. So I don't know how I got on that. But, oh yeah, the schools where they are.
Yeah, because I would love, if it's possible, to arrange a visit for when I'll be in New York, both to see the schools for older kids and also to visit yours, if it's possible. I would love that. I think, just on a personal note, on that, for the case study of this, I think probably with what you mentioned and what you can send, that's fine. But then for my own personal educational purposes, I would love to go visit these schools. Yeah, because it really does sound like very much in line with what I want to do, and it's making me feel like more and more, after 5 years of knowing that I want to do this and trying to learn different ways. Right now I was thinking yesterday that I'm I feel so ready in a way that it's like wanting to burst out of me.
Yeah.
But I need containment. Like I can't do it alone. I need some form of space team thing.
Yeah.
And it sounds like maybe with this it would be just possible with that kind of structure of collaboration and tools that are already there to try out. And so it's making me really excited, and I want to see and meet the people. And
yay. Awesome.
Yeah, it's I'm excited, and also strange that I'm just going there next week.
I know. Yeah, that's great. So what are your dates? Let me just so I can look and see.
Yeah. So I arrive on December 2nd, and I leave on December 14th.
Okay.
So I think it's a Friday to Wednesday, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So probably, let's see. For me, the best week would be like the 7th or 8th.
Okay.
For a visit to us.
Okay. Let's. For me, the 8th would be better because the 7th, my boyfriend is arriving to Manhattan, so I'm gonna go pick him up from the airport. But then the 8th I could do for sure.
Great.
Let me see what day of the week. Write it down. And do you have the contact of the people in New York or in the other schools in Manhattan, or how?
Yeah, I will. Let me email you and introduce you, because that'll help. They do get a ton of visitors, and so are a little more wary of letting people come in just because it gets crazy. So I'll just send an email introducing you guys and see if you can come. If you can go.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be great.
Awesome. Well, I just had a friend arrive that I'm supposed to go meet. I don't want to cut us short, but maybe we can talk more when you're here.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, for sure. It's already been an hour, so I was already trying to wrap up, also to be mindful of your time. Thanks so much. This has been so interesting in so many different respects, and I really do look forward.
Well, I know it was hard to connect this time, but really I'm happy to do it anytime if you have questions that come up or want to send me an email or anything like that. But it'll be great to actually meet in person too soon.
Yeah. So. Yes.
Cool.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
All right. All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.